Hey fearsome friends, I've got something exciting for you tonight. The story I'm about to read was a personal experience and all very much true. I've been reading this lovely lady's stories for a while now, and they never cease to amaze me. This story was also featured on the Netflix series Haunted, so be sure to give it a watch, and I'll put the details in the description below. So sit back, relax, and get cozy, comfy, warm, because it's time to let your nightmares in. My mother was a single parent with 6 very well-behaved children, 5 girls and 1 boy. My name is Brandy, and I was the youngest and was very small for my age. We were all opened up to the paranormal at an early age, and this took place in Hollywood, California in the late 60s. Mum knew her kids were all different, and she was very supportive of that fact. She would just tell us not to go around telling people, because they would think our family was crazy. And looking back at life with my mother, I tend to agree on so many levels. Something she always said stuck with me. People don't like what they can't understand. At the time, we were renting a downstairs duplex on Alexandria Street in Hollywood, California, which was across the street from this mean old lady. She lived in the back of a house, and her windows were all blacked out. She would scream at the kids who walked or rode their bikes nearby, and she'd even pop and deflate balls if they landed in her driveway, and would laugh. I tried to be her friend, because I loved everybody. But this woman had an evil soul. One day, our mother sat us down and told us that the owner of our house was getting a divorce, so she and her kids were going to be moving back in, so we had to leave. Mum knew it was going to be hard to come up with the money for the move, but she asked us to have faith in her, so we did. Mum worked 3 jobs and worked mostly in the day, so the only time she could go looking for rentals was at night. All 6 of us would pile into this big yellow wood panel station wagon with a suicide seat in the back, and off we would go on our adventure through the night. Most of the time, the doors to the rentals were unlocked. It was the 60s, and we were all armed with flashlights. But we had to be very quiet, of course. The scariest times for me was when the doors were locked, so me being the smallest, my brother would help me into an open window in the dark, so I could run to the door and open it for them. And now as I'm writing this, I believe that was breaking and entering. Now my brother and I were very sensitive, so if there was a house that made any one of us uncomfortable, Mama would scratch it off her list and move on. It was actually hard to find a house that fit all of us, especially anything my mother could afford. One day I came home from school and was surprised to see all of our stuff was being moved to the house directly across the street where the mean old lady lived in the back. I found my mother and asked what was going on, and she told me that she'd gotten a really good deal that she couldn't pass up. Just stay away from that old lady, she told me. It was an old 2-story house with wooden floors and a big porch that wrapped around the side. It had 1 bathroom and 3 bedrooms. It used to be 4 bedrooms, but a small portion in the back was divided to accommodate another tenant, that old lady. I was young and still very small for my age, so that house was much bigger than the duplex across the street. Boxes were everywhere, and there was so much commotion downstairs, and my mother was understandably distracted. I asked her why she hadn't waited so I could check the house for anything bad. Not wanting to make me feel dismissed, she took both of my hands and told me that there wasn't any time, and it was a good deal, so she had to take it. It also meant we wouldn't have to use a moving truck. She told me to check it out now and report back to her if anything was wrong. So feeling very important, I went off to investigate. I went into the kitchen, and it was big. I went into the dining room. It was fancy. And then I started my way up the stairs. Mum had mentioned that there was a bedroom big enough for all my sisters, a place for all my toys in the hall, and also a room for my brother. So I was excited to see this. The staircase was enclosed with a door at the bottom. Then up 4 steps you came to a landing where it turned to the right and then proceeded up from there. I got up to the top step when something got me. It felt like these 3 cold hands, quickly one after the other, grabbed around my throat with strong force. I tried to scream, but the grip was getting tighter, so much I thought my vocal cords were being crushed. These hands began to force me backwards with my back arched, and I felt like I was going to fall. But they just held me there for what seemed like forever, my toes teetering on the edge of the top step. I couldn't move. It felt like surges of electricity throughout my body. Then it started guiding me backwards down the steps. Fearing at any moment I was going to be thrown, I could see little spurts of my own breath coming out from my nose as they were guiding me back down the stairs. I could feel only the edge of the steps graze the tips of my toes, while I was trying to grip my foot on each step as I was being forced down. They led me to the landing and pressed my back against the wall. It felt like 1,000 weights were pressing against my chest, whilst I still hardly touched the floor. I was starting to pass out when I heard a voice in my head say to me, "You are strong. You have faith." In my mind I could see a white glowing light all around me, when I then said the only word that came to my mind, Om, which is the universal sound of God. This thing then lessened their grip ever so slightly, but it was enough for me to drop to the floor and run down to my mother. "Please, Mom, please, we can't live here." I told her what had just happened, but she said it was too late. We had no money and nowhere else to go. It wasn't long before everyone else in the family had their own experiences. We all hated that house, but we had to endure it until we could afford to move again. Now my brother liked to tinker, take things apart and see how they worked. He'd sometimes take the time to share that part of his life with me, and I'd like to think it's where I got my inventor's mind and my ability to fix almost anything. He'd set up a workshop downstairs in the basement, and sometimes I found some of my electronic toys being dissected so he could see how the mechanics worked. Then he would put them all back together on his workbench. One day I was looking for one of my toys, which was a little furry barking dog that could walk, and I suspected I knew right where to look. But I was too scared to go down into the brick-walled basement alone, so I took my trusted cat, Frischka. He will protect me, I thought. I started down the stairs with my cat in my arms, and almost to the bottom step, when the lights went out and the door to the house slammed shut. Scared to death, I felt for the railing and started to run back up, when I saw something. The house was on 3-foot stilts from the ground, so normally you could see the moonlight from underneath through the vents to the outside. Something moving was blocking the light out and quickly coming towards me. It almost looked like billowing black smoke from the back of the house. Just then my loving cat Frischka hissed and clawed me for the very first time ever to get away. He then jumped from my arms and escaped through one of the grates on the other side. I ran up the stairs as fast as I could, with my heart pounding out of my chest. I then grabbed the door handle and jiggled it back and forth, thinking it was stuck, when I heard a loud, long exhale behind me, followed by the smell of rotten eggs. The door finally opened, and I slammed and locked it behind me. When I told my brother, he said that he never felt good down there, and he kept the door always locked after that. Now my family was very involved in the temple. We cleaned it every Saturday and helped with all the events and variety shows. But the funny thing was, our family was so big, it felt like we were the variety show. One such day they were all at the temple doing something. I don't remember what. I had just arrived home from school, and someone, I think one of my sisters, was supposed to be there to greet me. Now this next event happened in the hallway. As you walked through the dining room into the hall, if you turned right, you'd then see on the left that there was a boarded up wall that led to the tenants that lived behind us, the evil old lady. Just thinking about her now gives me chills. Next to her room was our main bathroom, and if you turned left in the hall, you'd see my mum's room that she and I shared together. Next to her room was the door to the upstairs, and in the middle was the door to the basement. Well, right then, no one was home, and I wasn't going to stay in that house alone. So I walked into the hall and sat on the phone bench. For those of you who don't know what that is, it looks like it's a wooden end table with a padded seat on it, so you can talk on a corded phone. Earlier on, I'd seen my friend's dad's car parked across the street, so I knew my friend was home. I figured I would call him and hang out there until someone came home. As I was sitting there, though, I could hear a crackling noise coming from upstairs. It must be one of my siblings, I thought. So I went to the bottom of the stairs and leaned in on one foot. "Who's up there?" I called. The crackling stopped. Thinking they hadn't heard me, I yelled again, this time calling out a few of my sister's names, but still nothing. I sat back down on the bench and waited for them to come downstairs. It was quiet, not a sound. Just then, to the right of me, it sounded like someone was pressing their body against the other side of the boarded-up wall and was listening. Then came a muffled, evil giggle. It felt off, really off. The crackling noise started back up again, and was now coming from the top of the stairs, followed by an ear-piercing ringing inside my head. Feeling uncomfortable, I picked up the phone, not taking my eyes off the staircase. I dialed my friend's number, and before I could even say hello, I could see it as it turned the corner of the staircase on the landing. It was huge. It didn't have a human form, and there were what looked like hundreds of eyes all over it. It was pulsating red to amber, and the deafening sound of crackling was coming from it, with sparks flashing all over its form. It was slowly gliding down the stairs and coming towards me. I then heard more prominent laughter, almost like a cackle, coming from behind the boarded-up wall. I ran, dropped the phone, and went straight over to my friend's house until someone came home. Now please keep in mind that we only lasted 6 months in this house, so these are all the events that I know of within that time frame, and were confirmed to me by my siblings firsthand. Next is a brief description of where the next event took place. It was on the 2nd floor, standing at the top of the stairs, and to the left towards the back of the house where my brother's room was. Inside the door to the right was a short wall at the foot of his bed, and alongside his bed was a window with some curtains. All of the bed heads in our houses always faced east. Then there was a desk next to his bed, then an open space at the back corner near the closet. On the right of the stairs were all of my sister's rooms. It was long and big, and set up as follows. A closet to the far right, then lined from right to left were 4 single mattresses on the floor next to each other, with all heads to the east, and a window. My family were all avid readers. That's pretty much all you could do back then. And late one night, around 2 a.m., my sisters were all lying on their beds reading, when my brother burst open the door, white as a ghost, grabbing his neck, gasping for air, and frantically telling them all to go downstairs. He then briefly shared his experience with us, then ran out of the room. At that point, he'd run downstairs to wake up our mother. I knew this because I shared a room with her. Actually, one of the beds upstairs was supposed to be mine, but I always complained about seeing a man hanging from a rope over the staircase landing. Plus, I'd had way too many other experiences up there. The door swung open, slamming against the wall. My brother was standing there in a white t-shirt and PJ pants. There was no colour in his face, and his neck looked like it was on fire. He said that he was just falling asleep when he felt a negative presence, and something caught his eye in the back corner of the room. It was the full-body apparition of an old man, and there was hate emanating from him. He started to sit up in his bed, but the man flew at him from across the room. He tried to describe it as quick, like 1 second he was there, and the next he was on top of him. It was so fast that the curtains and everything else in the room was affected, like a big burst of wind had flown through the room. The man grabbed his neck with both hands, gripping it tightly, and was choking the life out of him. He said he was nose to nose with this thing, and to this day can't shake the evil image of his face. My sister and I both remember him saying at the time that the man in a guttural voice said, "I want your body." My mother put a cold rag on his neck and calmed him down. We all remember dark bruises in the shape of 2 hands that stayed on his neck and chest for over a week, and he never slept upstairs again. Over the years he never wanted to talk about it, until I told him I was writing this story. Now on that night, all my sisters brought down their bedding, except one, my sister Rachel. She was headstrong and stubborn, still is, and was the cut the crap it's all in your head type of person. Until it happened to her, that is. My eldest sister Linda tried to warn her that on numerous occasions she'd seen something dark lurking in the closet, and that one night she'd woken up to something pressing down on her whilst she was sleeping. But it didn't deter her. To her we were all dramatic and crazy. I guess Rachel thought that it was kind of cool, because she got that big room all to herself. Well, one day she was upstairs taking a nap. She never slept without the fan on, and the fan was located all the way across the room in front of said closet. The fan was round in the shape of a fat can. It was about 17 inches tall and 14 inches wide, with slats going around it about 2 inches apart, with big metal blades. My sister always slept with her arm extended out from under her pillow, and she said that she was sound asleep, when all of a sudden she awoke to her fingers being sliced by the metal blades of the fan, and was in extreme pain. She pulled her hand out of the fan and ran downstairs to our mother. I remember that there was a lot of blood. My mother wrapped her hand with gauze and papaya to eliminate scarring, and we all went up to investigate. The fan was still there, but it was unplugged, so we couldn't understand how it even got over there. We had shag carpet too, so it couldn't have vibrated. Plus it would have to travel over some articles of clothing that would have stopped it about 5 feet away from the bed. The plug was 2 across the room, where she said it was plugged in, and the cord wasn't long enough to reach her bed. You know, after having that happen to you, and the fact that your entire family is now sleeping together downstairs in the living room, and the fact that she saw the fan that cut her was unplugged, wouldn't that make you say uncle and join them downstairs in the living room? Nope, not her. She stayed sleeping up there for about a month, until she was forced to believe us. By this time she had made the room her own, taken 2 of the mattresses and put them on top of each other, and put them both long ways under the window. She told me that she was in the beginning stages of a dream state, when she was fully awakened by pressure on her chest. It felt dark and evil, and she couldn't move. All these things were racing through her head, when she remembered what our minister had told her when we were in council about this house. He told her to try to communicate with it, asking if it would allow her spirit guide into the light. So as she did this, the pressure started to get worse. The more love she sent, the heavier it got. She said it felt like a cement slab crushing her body and expelling all air out of her lungs. I asked her how she got out from under it, and she told me that she prayed and said some things our minister had told us to say, and it lifted. For the rest of the time we were there, she slept in the living room with us, and living there was hell. Every chance that old lady got, she tormented me. My brother and I both saw through her screen door that she had some dolls on her coffee table that looked like us, were made out of our own trash, with things stabbed into them. She used to watch me through her screen door while I was playing. She would stand outside our kitchen door and stare at us while we were cooking. My sister Melanie was in her bathroom one time, and we heard a shuffling on the other side. So being curious children, we put our ears to the wall and heard her breathing and swallowing. How long had she been listening, and why? Melanie, who made fun of me for not wanting to go upstairs or to the bathroom alone, was faced with her own frightening experience in the bathroom. While she was in the shower washing her hair, she opened her eyes and saw a face looking back at her in the shower. After that, I'd have to sit in the bathroom with her, and I felt very selfishly justified too, because not 2 weeks earlier, she thought it would be funny to take all of my art stuff and put it on the top of the stairs. But when I would go up to get it, I was scared to death when I turned around to run downstairs and saw a man hanging by his neck over the landing. One day my mother gave me instructions to water the plants outside, and the water handle was outside our kitchen door. All I know though is that my hand was on the handle, and the evil woman from next door just appeared behind me, almost pressing against my back with her hand over mine on the handle. I looked up at her in shock, and our eyes met, and there was nothing but hate in those blue-grey piercing eyes. She screamed in my face, "No water," as she dug her long nails into my little hand, and her breath smelled of old cheese. I guess my sister Charity could see this from the screen door, because she agreed that she was fast on top of me. Charity burst out of the door and yelled at her to get away from me, or it would be the first time she was going to beat up an old lady. The woman then released me, leaving marks on my hand from her nails, then backed away. My sister then yelled at her to go home. So many things happened in the short span of 6 months that we were there. We found out that a man had actually hung himself on the stairway, and someone had shot themselves in the closet upstairs. And as for the old lady in the back, she was a very bad alcoholic who practiced the dark arts, and my brother and I think it was specifically voodoo. She'd blackened out all of her windows to keep the energy pleased, she'd told the neighbour, and no one paid her any mind. All of her food and alcohol were delivered by the store, and she never had any visitors. Everyone thought she was just a crazy old lady, but we knew that there was so much more to her story. I often wondered who she was before this, and what made her that way. What happened to her that was so terrible that it made her want to torment others, and even worse, innocent children? Was the evil man in my brother's room connected to her in some way? I guess I will never know. But our minister told us that the house could never be truly cleansed until she was gone. Hey, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed my video. And if you did, could you please give me virtual hugs by subscribing and clicking that notifications button. I also have a Patreon page and YouTube channel membership if you'd like to support me further. Thank you again for being here. Keep being creepy.